Somewhere in rural Vietnam, there is a piece of land feeding the same family for over 300 years. No tractor ever touched it, no synthetic fertilizer, no pesticide, no irrigation system, no seed catalog, ever. And yet, every single year, without fail, this half acre produces fruit, nuts, roots, leaves, medicine, and timber, more food than a family of six can eat in a season. It feeds them in spring, in summer, in autumn, and from stored harvest through winter too. The family tending it today is the 28th generation to do so. They didn't build this garden, their ancestors did. They simply inherited it. And here is what the fertilizer industry, the seed companies, and 400 years of industrial agriculture would prefer you never stop to consider. You could build one too, starting this year, on land you already own. Our great grandparents understood something that modern horticulture spent the last century burying under bags of chemical fertilizer and proprietary seed catalogs. They understood that a forest, a real, layered, multi species forest, is the most productive and most self sustaining food producing system that nature has ever designed. Not the monoculture row crop, not the herbicide drenched lawn pretending to be a vegetable patch, the forest, and they built small ones right outside their doors for centuries. Cultures from Kerala in southern India to the Kandyan highlands of Sri Lanka, from the pre-Columbian Amazon to the communal gardens of Morocco's Atlas Mountains, all independently arrived at the same design, a stacked, layered, self-fertilizing food system that produces more per square foot than modern farming without ever needing to be replanted, reseeded, or refueled. The Kandyan forest gardens of Sri Lanka date back over 2,500 years. Robert Hart documented a family in Vietnam tending their food forest for 28 generations. Kerala alone hosts 3.5 million home gardens, covering 1.44 million hectares, each one sustained entirely by natural fertility. Modern researchers are now confirming what those ancestors proved with their lives. A 2025 global meta-analysis of 3,075 separate scientific comparisons published in Global Change Biology found that layered polyculture systems enhance ecosystem productivity and soil health simultaneously without sacrificing yield. A food forest in Coldstream, Scotland, produced nearly 9,000 kilograms per hectare per year from just 99 species. Robert Hart, the British horticulturist who formalized the seven-layer model in the 1980s on a half-acre plot in Shropshire, didn't invent anything. He simply gave a name to what Kerala had been doing for centuries. While we're spending hundreds of dollars every spring on seeds, amendments, and annuals we'll have to buy again next year, there is a seven-layer food forest design that plants itself once and feeds a family for generations. Today, I'm going to walk you through all seven layers, from the most accessible starting point all the way to the most extraordinary, multi-generational payoff in the history of human agriculture. Stick around because layer 4 on this list contains a single plant that mines potassium from 12 feet underground and deposits it on the surface for free. And Cornell University's soil scientists have finally confirmed what food forest growers have known for generations. And layer 7 is so astonishing that once you understand how it works, you will never look at an empty fence, a bare wall, or an unused vertical surface the same way again. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because we post practical ancestral growing wisdom every single week that will cut your gardening costs and make you more self-sufficient starting this season. So let's get into it. There is a chestnut tree in Sicily, the 100-horse chestnut Castanea sativa, estimated to be somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 years old. It has outlived empires. It survived the Roman collapse, the medieval plagues, the unification of Italy, and for every one of those centuries, it has dropped its sweet, starchy nuts in autumn, feeding whatever community was fortunate enough to live within its reach. This is layer 1, the canopy layer, the tall trees reaching 9 meters and above that form the structural backbone of the entire system. Medieval European peasants called the chestnut the bread tree. In the Ligurian highlands of northern Italy, Castanea sativa was so central to survival that communities measured their wealth in chestnut trees rather than acres of grain. One mature tree produces between 40 and 80 kilograms of nuts per season, nuts that contain more complex carbohydrate than wheat and can be dried, milled into flour, or stored whole through winter. Modern nutrition science confirms what those mountain communities staked their lives on. Chestnuts are uniquely low in fat among tree nuts, just 2 grams per 100 grams of flesh, while delivering vitamin C, potassium, and manganese. They are the only nut that behaves nutritionally like a grain, which is precisely why they substituted for grain in communities where wheat couldn't grow. Here is why the canopy is the foundation of everything else. Deep-rooted trees mine minerals from subsoil layers that shallow crops can never reach. A walnut tree, Juglans regia, extends its taproot 12 to 15 feet into the earth, accessing calcium, magnesium, and potassium trapped in rock layers that no garden trowel will ever touch. When that tree drops its leaves each autumn, it deposits those deep-mined minerals directly on the surface in a form that every plant in the layers below can use immediately. The canopy tree is not just a food source, it is a mineral pump, cycling nutrients upward year after year, building fertility instead of consuming it. The canopy got quietly written out of Western horticulture for one precise reason. You cannot sell a chestnut tree twice. You cannot charge a family for replacement seed when the tree replants itself through its fallen nuts. So the industry taught us to think of trees as landscaping and annual vegetables as food. But those Italian grandmothers tending their chestnut groves for 1,000 years knew the difference, and that tree is still standing in Sicily, still bearing fruit, still reminding anyone patient enough to look. Think of the canopy tree as the family patriarch who only has to show up once, and then provides for everyone who comes after him for centuries. Picture a grandmother's garden somewhere in Eastern Europe. Early October, the air smells of cold soil and wood smoke. She reaches into a gnarled tree and barely taller than she is, and pulls a cluster of deep red berries, small and tart, the color of dark garnets. She brings them inside without ceremony. By evening, they have become the syrup her family has relied upon every winter. For as long as anyone can remember, she does not call it medicine. She calls it the thing you make in October so nobody gets sick in February. She is harvesting Sambucus nigra, the black elderberry, and she has no idea that what she is doing has been validated in a 2004 randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of International Medical Research, showing elderberry syrup reduced influenza duration by 4 full days in 60 patients, or that in 2023, researchers showed elderberry extract inhibited 6 separate SARS-CoV-2 variants in laboratory conditions. The antiviral flavonoids responsible, cyanidin, 3-glucoside at 65.7% of total anthocyanin content, reach an in vitro ASOC 50 of just 0.36 micromolar. Tamiflu, for comparison, registers 0.32. The subcanopy, layer 2, trees between 3 and 9 meters, is the food forest's living medicine cabinet. Elderberry earns its place here not just for its immune protective properties, but as one of the most productive and forgiving small trees in a temperate food forest. It grows 6 to 8 feet in its first year from a single cutting. It self-seeds prolifically. It tolerates poor soil, wet soil, and partial shade. And it produces twice: flowers in late spring for elderflower cordial and dark berries in early autumn for syrup, wine, or jam. You plant it once, and it gives you 2 full harvests every year until you no longer need them. The subcanopy was overlooked by industrial medicine for exactly one reason. You cannot patent a plant. Pharmaceutical companies cannot hold intellectual property over Sambucus nigra. They cannot charge a family $6 per dose for something that grows to the roofline in a backyard. So elderberry stayed a folk remedy, a grandmother's quiet knowledge, until university researchers caught up to what every traditional household already knew. Think of the subcanopy as the layer that heals you twice. once in spring with its flowers, and once in autumn with its berries, asking nothing in return but a small corner of ground. In the 1980s, Polish researchers were trying to understand why certain Eastern European communities showed unusually low rates of cardiovascular disease despite diets high in fat and low in fresh vegetables. What they found was a small black berry the size of a blueberry that most of the Western world had never heard of. Aronia melanocarpa, the black chokeberry. It grows as a dense shrub to about 2 meters. It tolerates almost any soil, clay or sand, acid or alkaline. It needs no spraying, no staking, no coddling. It produces its first crop in year 2, and in terms of anthocyanin density, it is the most concentrated edible berry on the planet, at 1,480 milligrams per 100 grams of fresh fruit, with an ORAC antioxidant value of 16,062 micromoles per 100 grams. Blueberry, for comparison, registers roughly 4,500. Studies have shown aronia extract reduced chemically induced colon cancer by up to 80% in controlled animal trials. Layer 3, the shrub layer, is the food forest's defensive perimeter turned inward for human health. Hawthorn, Crataegus monogyna, contains the flavonoids vitexin and hypericide, along with oligomeric proanthocyanidins at 1 to 3% of dry weight. A 2025 meta-analysis of 6 randomized controlled trials found hawthorn extract decreased systolic blood pressure by 6.65 millimeters of mercury, results comparable to low-dose prescription antihypertensives. Your grandfather's hedgerow was a pharmacy that asked nothing, grew without labor, and self-seeded into every gap. The shrub layer was stripped from the western landscape in 2 waves. First, England's Enclosure Acts, over 5,200 individual acts between 1604 and 1914, cleared the common land where rural communities had gathered hawthorn berries and elderflower for centuries. Then the 20th century's chemical revolution replaced the hedgerow with the pesticide bottle. But aronia is still available. Hawthorn is still growing. The shrub layer is still waiting. Think of the shrub layer as the hedge your great-great-grandparents walked through every morning, the one quietly keeping them well, long before the doctor's waiting room existed. Now, if you're finding this valuable and starting to realize just how much we have been overcomplicating things, do me a huge favor and hit that like button right now. It helps this video reach other people who are tired of spending money every spring on something their ancestors got for free. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button and ring the bell. We are building a community of people who believe that simplicity and patience beat complexity every single time. And I would love to have you as part of it. All right, let's keep going because we are just getting to the really spectacular ones. Here is something that sounds like a garden myth until you look at the data. There is a plant, common, rough-leaved, deeply rooted, that sends its taproot 4 to 6 feet into the subsoil, pulls up potassium, silicon, calcium, and phosphorus from rock layers that no garden trowel will ever reach, and then deposits those minerals directly onto the surface when you cut its leaves. You cut the leaves. That is the entire gardening action required. The leaves mulch where they fall. The minerals transfer into the topsoil. Every plant within arm's reach gets fed for free. It does this 3 to 5 times per season, year after year, from a single planting that regenerates from the tiniest root fragment left in the ground. Cornell University's Small Farms program, in a 2022 study funded by the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, measured mineral concentrations in dynamic accumulator plants from a working food forest at the Unadilla Community Farm in New York. Comfrey Symphytum officinale accumulated potassium at 52,959 parts per million in dried foliage. A bag of organic potassium fertilizer runs $12 to $15 and lasts 1 season. A comfrey plant costs about $3 once, grows to 3 feet wide within a season, and produces usable mulch material for the rest of its life, which, practically speaking, is forever. Layer 4, the herbaceous layer, is where the food forest does its most invisible and its most important work. Asparagus officinalis emerges here every April for up to 20 years from a single planted crown, without replanting, without reseeding, without any intervention at all. Sweet Sicily Myrrhis odorata provides anise-flavored leaves, seeds, and edible roots, self-seeding freely across the layer below. Good King Henry, Chenopodium, Bonus henricus, a perennial spinach grown since Roman times, pushes its first edible shoots up in early spring before almost anything else in the garden has woken up. The herbaceous layer was dismissed by modern horticulture for one precise reason. Perennial vegetables don't sell seed packets every year. Annual gardening is a subscription model. You pay again every spring. Perennial food production is a one-time purchase. The industry chose the model that profits them, not the one that serves you. Think of the herbaceous layer as the gardener who keeps working long after you've put down your trowel, cutting its own leaves, feeding its own soil, asking only for a little space and an enormous amount of patience. In every conventional garden, the ground between plants is treated as a problem, something to be smothered in bark mulch or killed with herbicide. Bare soil is the enemy, the grower is told, and the solution costs money every single season. A food forest solves this differently. Layer 5, the ground cover layer, plants under 30 centimeters, seals the soil with life rather than leaving it open to erosion and moisture loss. White clover, Trifolium repens, fixes atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil at roughly 100 to 150 kilograms per hectare per year, making it available to every plant it grows among. It flowers for pollinators all summer. It outcompetes most weeds by sheer density, and it requires no maintenance once established from seed. Wild strawberry, Arfragaria vesca, spreads by runner to fill every gap beneath the shrubs, producing intense fruit from May through the first frost. Ramsons, Allium ursinum, wild garlic, carpets shaded ground in early spring, offering edible leaves, flowers, and bulbs. The entire ground cover layer performs 4 jobs simultaneously: weed suppression, moisture retention, nitrogen fixation, and pollinator support, without any single one of those jobs requiring human labor after year 1. The herbicide revolution was not only an environmental disaster, it was a business model. An herbicide dependency is a 50-year revenue stream. The modern landscape of bare mulch and chemical weed control isn't evidence that nature's way failed. It's evidence of what a well-funded marketing campaign can do to 1,000 years of traditional knowledge. Think of the ground cover layer as the loyal workforce that never clocks out, never asks for a raise, and makes the entire workplace better for everyone around it. Layer 6 functions below the surface, out of sight, quietly producing food in a dimension that most gardeners never think to farm. Jerusalem artichoke, Helianthus tuberosus, a native North American perennial, produces knobbly, sweet tubers from late October through February, precisely when nothing else in a temperate garden is producing fresh food. Once planted, it is essentially indestructible. It grows 6 to 10 feet tall, provides windbreak above ground, produces pollinator flowers in late summer, and regenerates from the smallest fragment left in the soil. A single planting feeds a family from the root layer indefinitely. The groundnut, Apios americana, fixes nitrogen through root nodules above while producing protein-rich tubers below, stacking 2 functions into one undemanding plant. Native American communities from the Cherokee to the Wampanoag relied on it as a staple for centuries before European settlers dismissed it as a weed rather than a crop. Walking onion, Allium cepavar, proliferum replants itself automatically as its top-heavy stems bend and touch the earth, in a self-perpetuating cycle requiring zero human intervention. The root layer was erased from Western food culture because underground perennial crops are inconvenient for industrial processing. These crops live outside the industrial food machine. So the machine spent a century researching wheat, corn, and soy, rather than the perennial roots that fed indigenous communities for thousands of years without inputs, without irrigation, and without soil depletion. Think of the root layer as the savings account that deposits every autumn and never charges a fee. Reliable exactly when you need it most, in the cold months when everything above ground has gone to sleep. And here we are at layer 7, the one I saved for last because it represents everything we have talked about today, and because it answers the question every gardener eventually asks: what do I do with the space I don't have? Somewhere in Devon, in southwestern England, there is a man named Martin Crawford who has been tending a 2.5 acre food forest since 1994. Over 500 plant species grow on that land at the Agroforestry Research Trust, every single one taste tested by Crawford personally. 50,000 visitors have walked through that garden in 31 years. It has inspired food forests at the Royal Horticultural Society, at the National Trust, and on 4 continents. And when visitors see it for the first time, what surprises them most is not the density of the trees or the abundance of the shrubs. It is the vines. Every fence, every trellis, every vertical surface is alive and producing food. Hardy kiwi, Actinidia arguta, producing smooth-skinned, grape-sized fruit with no peeling required, from a vine that withstands minus 25 degrees Celsius. Hops, Humulus lupulus, providing bitter flowers for home brewing, and young shoots as a spring vegetable growing 20 feet in a single season from roots that return every year. Grape, Vitis vinifera, trained into the subcanopy, producing fruit upward without occupying a single square foot of ground. Caucasian spinach, Hablitzia tamnoides, a shade-tolerant climber from the Caucasus Mountains, producing edible leaves from April through October, climbing to 15 feet, returning every year from its deep perennial root without any tending at all. The vine layer is the food forest's answer to the one resource a garden always runs out of: horizontal ground. Vines don't need it. They climb, they drape, they transform a fence into a food source, a wall into a pantry, a dead post into a 20-year calorie machine. You plant a hardy kiwi once, it feeds you for 50 years. The Caucasian spinach comes back every spring without being asked. The hops multiply from their rhizome year after year. The grape builds its root system deeper and more resilient with each passing decade, becoming more productive as the years compound, not less. The vine layer was quietly removed from Western kitchen gardens, not because it failed to produce. It was removed because it produced in forms that industrial food systems couldn't capture. You cannot combine harvest, a grapevine trailing up a living tree. You cannot automate the picking of hardy kiwi from a food forest canopy. These crops live outside the monoculture machine, so the machine pretended they didn't exist as food. They became ornamentals, curiosities, conversation pieces, not food, never food. But the vine is patient. It has been waiting on your fences all along. The food forest, all 7 layers of it, reminds us that growing food doesn't have to be complicated, expensive, or exhausting. Sometimes the most productive, most beautiful, most self-sustaining food system is the one that works the way a forest works, slowly, patiently, with each part supporting every other part in a system so elegantly balanced that it can outlive the person who planted it, and the person after them, and the 26 generations that follow. Robert Hart planted his food forest in Shropshire in the 1980s. It fed him until he died. Martin Crawford planted his in Devon in 1994. It is still producing. A family in Vietnam has tended theirs for 300 years and 28 generations. The layers haven't changed. The system hasn't changed. Only our memory of it has. And today, you got a little of that memory back. Think of the food forest as the garden that trusts you enough to outlive you and loves you enough to feed everyone who comes. If you made it to the end of this video, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps other people who are tired of the complicated, expensive way find this simpler, older path. Drop a comment below and tell me which layer you're most excited to start with. Are you team canopy planting for the long game, Team Shrub Layer, starting with medicine, or Team Vine, going vertical this season. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. We are building a community of growers who believe that the oldest knowledge is still the best knowledge, and that the most radical thing any of us can do is plant something that will still be feeding people long after we are gone. I would love to have you on that journey.